Welcome to The Noble Marriage, where we bring real, relatable, and raw conversations all about life and marriage. Hey, babe.
Oh, hey, handsome. It's
good to see you today for episode
11.
11.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you are just joining us, thank you for joining our channel today. Today's conversation is all about secondary trauma and how I was also dealing with codependency and the mask of perfectionism.
Oh, this is going to be good. Last week was about my PTSD, how I've experienced it, how I was able to get healing from PTSD, and you can experience some of that too. And please go back and watch that. Yeah. I'm excited for this one because it's not about me necessarily. Right. It is about me, but it's not.
It's nice that we go back and forth, because on the side of like the interviewing, it's much easier and more relaxing. And on the side of the interviewed, it's like, oh, I'm on stage. I'm in the spotlight.
I like that too. I feel so relaxed right now.
Oh, good.
I have gratitude.
Me too.
I have gratitude for you. So yesterday you asked me to kind of slow my roll on doing something. You're like, hey, I don't think this is a wise decision for you, Travis. I think you should wait on this. I think you should hold off on this. And I didn't think
it's necessary.
I didn't want to really hear you at that moment, and it was a very wise decision that you said. It was a very wise decision, and I'm very grateful that you told me that, because it worked out exactly the way you told me.
Yeah, it did. God came through, didn't he?
Thank you. I'm grateful.
Like he always does. Thank you. I received that. And thank you for that. I am grateful for how every morning you wake up so cheerful and loving and excited to start the day. You're very pleasant to be around. And I love waking up next to you. I'm very grateful that we share a bed and wake up together.
Thank you. I received that too, and I like being that way.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in, and I'll start. This is a portion from a chapter I call Behind the Mask of Perfectionism. And this is
the mask of perfectionism. So you had perfectionistic.
You got that.
Yeah. Perfectionistic tendencies.
Perfectionism.
Profession.
You've almost got it. It's all right. But the last week's episode where you talked about a traumatic incident that later turned into PTSD, that was also the incident for me that began this whole perfectionism thing, because that's when my life started to really fall apart and I didn't want other people to know. And so I'm just going to jump in and start reading.
Let's do it.
I started noticing changes after a very traumatic incident where Travis was blamed publicly for murdering a man on national television and then sued year after year for wrongful death, each time to be found not guilty. He was actually the guy that tried to save his life. It was heartbreaking to go through this only a year into our marriage. This kick-started a normalcy of chaos in our lives. Our house was shot at, and I was looking over my shoulder in fear. And I had to hide for several weeks to be sure we were safe from the retaliation of gang members towards our family. Not long after this, we moved to get out of the city that he worked in hopes that it would bring some normalcy back to our lives. This, among many other circumstances that happened, gave me a clear glimpse of just how much Travis needed the alcohol. There were so many times that I wondered if this was healthy, but I would just push that thought out of my mind because I couldn't fathom asking him to give up what I knew was providing the relief that he needed. It was his escape. I was beginning to feel drained after being around him. Emotionally, his heart was walled off from me, and I couldn't connect with him at all, it seemed. I hadn't been able to reach him like I thought when we first got married. In fact, the walls around his heart only got higher. And here I thought I would change him in that area after we got married. I was so disillusioned that I would change anything about this man after we got married. I think a lot of couples go into their marriage or relationship thinking they will just work on each other to get better together. And in turn, we just feel manipulated and controlled instead.
I don't like to be manipulated and controlled.
Me either. But it's funny how I thought that that's how I would go about it. Is just change you.
Right. Mm-hmm. I'm curious if you guys have ever experienced that in your relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of couples we coach also experience that. And it's not something we talk about or have conversation about, but it's an unmet expectation.
You talk about that wall around my heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That wall I couldn't penetrate through it. I tried a lot of different ways to have conversation with you and try to get in your world. But honestly, because you weren't sharing with me and having conversation with me, I thought you had it all together.
You did?
There was this wall, but behind it was this strength.
Oh, okay. I see. The facade was working.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And so we had just gone through this horrible incident, and I'm feeling really disconnected from you just having gone through this, and I can't get you to talk to me about it, except you would talk about fear, paranoia, needing to have a gun on you, needing to be safe. You were very safety conscious after that. And there were rules and things that we had to all follow to be safe. So those are the conversations you would have with me, but nothing like what's going on in your heart.
Yeah, when you're talking about those walls and feeling disconnected and unable to reach me, I'm curious if you have experienced that with your in your relationships where you're trying to reach your spouse, you're trying to make bids toward your spouse in some way, and it just seems like the walls are so high and unpenetrable to be able to get past those walls.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you're experiencing that or have experienced that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the sheer level of chaos really created a secondary trauma.
Did you feel like what I was going through was creating a secondary trauma for you and what you were experiencing?
Yes. Yeah, I was having my own PTSD. It wasn't at the level that you were experiencing it, but I had fear, a lot of fear.
Yeah, I could see that. I've said that before, maybe on a different episode. It's contagious. Fear is contagious. So is faith. Faith and fear. I can be exuding either one of those, and you're gonna catch on to whichever one I'm putting out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a time in our life that I am so glad is in the past. I never want to relive that time. It was so challenging.
I know that you did a lot to occupy yourself and to throw yourself into other things for you to escape that secondary trauma. Do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I was drinking myself. I was doing a lot of shopping to get my mind off of it because it would bring this pleasure and joy in the middle of all this chaos and pain.
Your work?
Oh, I was throwing myself into my business because I knew I was good at that and I could win at that when there were so many other things not winning at home and in my personal life.
Yeah, I'm sure that's relatable on the other side of this camera too, is You know what? If I'm feeling this and I don't want to feel this, maybe a good way to not feel it is to just consume myself with my work, consume myself with substances that will help me to escape it. I talked a good bit about that in my own personal life. I think it was last episode where I would escape.
Right. Yeah, my business was a great way to avoid pain. For sure.
You mentioned you stopped bringing up concerns about my drinking. Was it difficult to talk about that with me or my well-being?
You would shut down any kind of conversation around your health, your well-being. I remember having a conversation with you. It was, right after you had caught me smoking. And so we were having conversation about things that were unhealthy for us. And you were talking to me about how unhealthy that is. And I'm like, well, how about your drinking? Let's talk about that. No, we're not going to talk about that, actually. I learned that really quick. And I felt like, oh, you have doubled standards. It's not okay for me, but it's okay for you. And I normalized that in my mind because I knew the stress you were under. And I was thinking to myself, well, who would he even be with stress and no alcohol? And I didn't really want to find that out. So in the next section, I think we even get into codependency.
Let's get into it.
But I really went into that. And I remember you were like, fine, I don't need alcohol. And I was like, okay, well then 1 drink a day. Let's see how you do. And you were like, I got that. That's not an issue. I'm not addicted to drinking it. And I caught you sneaking more drinks behind my back. And I was like, do you remember that?
No.
You don't?
No, but I'm really enjoying this.
Wow. It's not okay for me to sneak and smoke behind your back, but it's okay if you drink behind my back. There's just so much going on in my head during that time that I was more focused on your behaviors than what was really going on with you because they were in my face and I didn't know how else or what else to focus on.
That's interesting. You said that you're focused on my behaviors rather than my heart and what's really going on the inside.
Yeah, because that was just a lot more obvious.
And the behaviors are the way I'm manifesting on the outside, the pain I'm experiencing on the inside.
Right. Yeah, all the unhealthy ways you were acting and being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's go into the book.
All right, so back to the book. Some of the things that initially attracted me to Travis were beginning to fade away. The first thing I noticed was he stopped taking care of himself physically. He stopped exercising. He was eating poorly, and his body began deteriorating as if he were a 70-year-old man. It was so hard to watch. Any kind of conversation around this would end abruptly, so I would do my best to keep quiet and not judge what he was going through. I had given up on spiritual connection. Occasionally, I would ask him something about church or God, and most of the time I was met with defensiveness. This would completely shut me down, and I stopped inquiring about his relationship with God. My marriage was falling apart, and I knew it in my heart. Could I live like this forever? What would my parents think? What would my friends think? It was too much for me to bear. This is when perfectionism began to kick into high gear for me. I needed things to look good on the outside. I began to attempt to perfect everyone and everything around me. I was on a mission to take control of my life and make it perfect. I tried so hard to fix and change some close relationships in my life and tell myself it was because I was only trying to help them. I've learned that people don't want to be fixed, especially when I've had so many faults and failures myself. Who am I to try to help anyone? What was I thinking? I don't know. Not at me. I was not looking at me. That's for sure.
And you realize you could not change me.
No. I tried in so many ways to go about that, and each one I failed miserably, which just made me feel more out of control and unable to process, where do I go from here if I can't fix you, if I can't get you to be better. I desperately wanted healing for you, but I went about it in all the wrong ways.
Right. And have you ever wanted to do that in your relationship? Wanted to control and fix someone and who they are? And how did that work out?
Right.
I'd love to hear that in the comments.
Yeah.
How that worked out.
Yeah. It doesn't usually work out very well. The other person feels broken, more insufficient to be in control of their life that way. But I sure did try. And that's why I was throwing myself into my business, was because I couldn't do anything about it. And I knew it.
You wanted to have this disillusionment in your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I was living in this, okay, I need everyone else to think that my life is perfect. And so I need to create a perfect life on the outside. Well, Instagram and Facebook were Instagram was just coming out. Mm-hmm. Maybe not even Instagram. I think it may have just been Facebook, but it was big. And I started to realize that when I would post pictures of us and write something nice about us, it made me feel good. And I enjoyed that escape of, well, this is what I really believe. Is what I'm writing about. But there was a truth behind what was really going on. Yes, I did feel these ways about you, and I chose to focus only on that and stop looking at what was really going on, because I couldn't deal with that, but I could deal with this over here.
A made-up reality.
It was a totally alternate reality that I was living in, but other people were believing it. And so I realized it's more real
That's good.
than I had initially started out for it to be.
Right. That is good.
Yeah, and I had close people to me call me out on it too, and I did not like that. Don't point out the things that are really going on in my life.
That's too hard to deal with.
That is, yeah. Wow, now you're talking about how imperfect I am, and no. Do you not see what I've created? What my life really is? Can you not see how happy I am? How great it is at home?
The house, the car, the monies.
The facade.
The clothes.
That perfectionism is exhausting, by the way. And I'm going to talk a lot more about perfectionism in the future, because this is just what started it. And it manifests and grows into a whole entity of its own, a whole nother person that was not me.
Right. You mentioned in there that the feelings that you initially had for me had changed. What was that like for you?
I had so much resentment. I mean, okay, so I'm going to share from two perspectives. I'm going to share from my perspective then, and then I'm going to share from my perspective now.
Okay.
So my perspective then was how dare you let yourself go like that and stop taking, and it just be all about you and woe is me. And I just had no pity or I just was actually turned off completely by how you were acting. Perspective now, I was so unhealthy myself. For me to be judging you and your decisions, your poor decisions, I was making equally poor decisions in my life. But somehow I was able to blame you in a way that kept me from looking at myself. Because you're the problem here. And if you weren't doing the things that you were doing, then my life would be better.
Right.
You're creating misery in my life. because of this. And, let's just talk about in marriage, it's for better or for worse. And this is the worst. Like this, and it gets worse. If you hang around long enough to hear more.
Stay tuned.
If it could get worse, it does. It gets worse. And I look back at that and I don't know how we got through it without God, for one. It's probably why it went on as long as it did, the misery and the chaos. But
why do you think that conversations between us about my well-being, why do you think it ended?
Well, because that was just too uncomfortable for you to look at yourself. Yeah.
And my reactions to you were extremely strong. I taught you.
Yes,
I taught you a
did.
lesson.
I learned.
I taught you there are some things that you will not bring up, that we will not talk about in this family.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that relates to a good bit of audience listening, that there are things that just aren't approachable to talk about in the family.
Well, because you have these negative reactions that happen that push people away. We all do. We all have them.
Prickly. I become
They
prickly.
are prickly.
Rah.
And when I address that thing, you become prickly, which teaches me, don't approach you.
Yeah, because what you're bringing up in my mind is I'm a failure, I'm unworthy, I'm being judged by you. There's a thorn that I have that I do not want to even look at or address. And so anger, rage, control, defensiveness, negative body language, sarcasm, isolation, stonewalling, that's what's going to come out of me.
Yeah, and I also needed you to accept me. And I could not handle rejection. And so if I did approach something and you would react like that, I would feel so rejected and unaccepted. So it was easier for me to not make waves so that I didn't feel that, because that was worse than trying to have these conversations. I would just avoid them as well. Throw myself into my business and all is peachy. Yeah.
Perfect.
But I also was feeling really stuck. I was feeling helpless and powerless because I was stuck in a marriage for better or for worse. And I'm watching you decline and it impacts me. And what am I going to do? We're 2 years, a year to 2 years at this point into our marriage. And I just signed a lifelong agreement.
Oh, this is going to relate on the other end of that camera.
I felt so stuck.
Wow. I imagine a good bit of you on the other side of this. You've experienced that where you know you're doing the right thing in life. You may be doing all the things, taking care of yourself spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And then you see your spouse, which you have no control over. You know, they're not taking care of themselves in those 4 areas of life, and what is also equally 4 areas of attraction.
Exactly. Well, that's a good topic, because that's why I stopped being attracted to you, is you let the 4 areas of your well-being go. Mm-hmm. And the man that I married was no longer that man because you let yourself go. And I'm pointing at you as I'm stuck, but I let myself go too. I mean, I was a good bit overweight.
Typical.
Yeah.
It's very typical. Mm-hmm. What's the use?
Right. If you're not going to take care of yourself, why should I? Let's both run ourselves into the ground.
Yeah,
that sounds fun. I don't know what we were thinking. Like, the other thing was we were comparing ourselves to other unhealthy people around us. We're better than them, so we must be okay. It's all right.
So
this is normal stuff, normal life stuff. Everybody deals with this. We're nobody like special. Just grind through it.
Yeah, our brain does that when we are having this cognitive dissonance between what we want and like, and what you're talking about is if I'm smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and we all know that that's wrong, that is killing people now, and Yet you're smoking 5-packs as my neighbor.
Oh, it's
That's
not
not
as
that
bad
bad.
as you.
It's not as bad. All of a
I
sudden,
must be okay.
Yeah, all of a sudden it's not nearly as bad, so I can justify these behaviors that I'm doing.
Right. Yeah.
Let's get back into the book.
Okay. We occupied all our time together by creating and running businesses. We needed to be successful in life, and we were nowhere close to success. So that meant adding on 2 to 3 businesses at a time. It's the American dream, right? Have a big house, have lots of toys and gadgets to show for it, drive expensive cars, and dress the part. These things became a focal point for us. We started having conversations about business and figured out we were pretty good at it together. We began traveling to all-inclusive vacation spots to lay on the beach, drink, and numb out of life from all the stress we were under because of our businesses. If we weren't talking about our businesses, we were arguing, bickering, and fighting. We never had resolutions to any of these issues. We are both strong-willed individuals, and admitting to our wrong was not part of either of our responses. Instead, they got added to the very long list of things we just can't talk about because we argue about everything. Over the dumbest stuff, too. Somewhere along the way, we also became so serious about everything. We stopped laughing together, and it all became about work, money, and success. I had so much emptiness on the inside. Emptiness I didn't know what to do with. My drinking went to an unhealthy level of a bottle of wine a night just to ease the tension I was feeling on the inside and disconnect from the pain in my heart. I needed to feel numb from the internal chaos. I began gaining weight from my unhealthy eating habits, and this took a toll on my self-esteem and confidence. I would show others I had it all together, but under the mask of perfectionism, I was insecure, scared, and not good enough on the inside. I would beat myself up internally to the point of depression. My thoughts were of such poor quality that there would be entire days I couldn't get out of bed. But instead of working on my thought life, I ran to coping behaviors such as shopping, drinking, partying, and medication. Not once did it cross my mind that I needed help. That would just mean that I'm even more broken, and I cannot let others see my brokenness. Just work harder, be more successful, and everyone will like me. Everyone will want what I have, and people will think highly of me. This will surely make me a confident, good enough, and secure woman. But what was really going on was I had a bruised, battered, and broken heart that was bleeding out underneath the mask of perfectionism. My life continued to spiral out of control. I started taking medication to help me sleep at night. My back started giving me all kinds of trouble, and I was miserable at home. I was now experiencing constant anxiety. I couldn't turn my thoughts and worries off at night. So most nights I would stay up as long as I could until I would crash. This cycle got my sleep patterns all out of whack. Looking back, I can see how unhealthy my lifestyle was. But at the time, I was clueless as to what was healthy. Travis would drink several drinks a night on most nights. I didn't grow up around alcohol, so I didn't know what was healthy, and honestly, I sort of liked him better when he was drinking. Without it, he was short-tempered and what I call prickly to be around. So rather than question the drinking, I would purchase it for him to be sure that he was even-keeled at home to tolerate being around each other. I came up with the understanding that he needed the alcohol in order to chill after a hard work day and disconnect from the awful things he was constantly exposed to. It would help him get his mind off the traumatic scenes or car chases he was involved in earlier in the day. I desperately wanted him to confide in me about how he was feeling. Sometimes he would tell me the things that happened at work, and most of the time he wouldn't. I didn't have any clue as to how traumatic it really was for him. until much later on. There's a lot going on in that little section there.
There were so many times I wanted to pause you.
I know. I almost
Can we
paused.
talk about this?
I almost
Can we talk
paused.
about this?
Yeah.
I want to start off with the success part, though.
Yeah.
You mentioned this idea of success, and we hadn't made it yet. In that season of our life, we hadn't made it to the success. And that is one of our coaching tools we use now is when we talk to people, we ask them to define what that really means.
Man, I really wish
to
we would
them.
have defined that because I was chasing something that didn't even exist.
Wouldn't you want that if you are aiming toward something like success? Wouldn't you want to know what that definition is so that you would know whether you met it? Mm-hmm. And we did not know it. I want to go what my idea of success was. You mentioned, you alluded to it, was the big house, the nice cars,
Expensive cars,
the expensive
the toys,
watches,
the gadgets,
Yeah, all
all
the
the
toys,
latest, greatest
everything
things.
latest and greatest that other people had. And
Which was actually like super exhausting because we had to keep up with all of the people around us.
I wanted more property. I wanted other property and boats, and I wanted gadgets. And something I've discovered is the more I own, it ends up owning me. I've got to pay rent and maintenance and upkeep and taxes, and I got to mow the lawns on the things and change the oil in the things and
get storage units for all the stuff.
It's exhausting. So that was my idea of success. Not having a healthy, thriving marriage,
Right.
raising kids who are dependent upon God as their Lord and Savior, and that they're well run and their emotions are well done, and that we take care of ourselves in the 4 areas of life. That was not there at all. So
Yeah,
what
and
was
I
your...
think, I think the reason we were chasing this success is you and I found we were good at it. And it was the only thing we were winning at together.
Entrepreneurship.
Because everything else was like a big fat failing.
Yeah.
And we were running from that. So we were running in this direction of success, thinking, well, at least we can run hand in hand doing this. That was kind of my perspective. So I didn't really care what success was. It was that you and I were doing it together. And that was, that's what I wanted.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks for saying that. It's different from mine, and I appreciate your...
But I did want all those things. I just didn't have that same drive to get them as much as I just wanted to be with you.
Yeah, I know I put a lot of those into you. Mm-hmm. Like when I forced a luxury car onto you, I forced a luxury watch onto you, and I said...
I didn't like either one of them.
You didn't like either one of them. And I made you use them and drive them and wear them, and... Interesting.
Thanks for that.
I thought you would love it.
I really want to talk about this perfectionism there, especially where I was talking about how I needed to escape the pain and that perfectionism, where it says, just work harder, be more successful, and everyone will like me. That was really what was driving me. People are going to like me. I'm going to look confident. I'm going to look good enough, and I'm going to look secure.
I like that too. I like knowing that people on the outside of me approve of me, and I would like to be looked up to, and I would like to be have this thought process that I'm accepted and appreciated and loved and
valued.
Yeah, I like
needed.
that.
And all of these things that I was seeking are opposite of my thorns. And if we haven't talked about thorns, we are going to talk a lot about them and what they are, but they are core fears in our heart that have us reacting certain ways to protect my heart, to protect myself, but then I go seek the opposite of what I'm feeling. So I'm feeling not good enough, but this business makes me feel good enough. It makes me look good enough. Maybe I'm not feeling it. But other people think it about me, which is what I
is
need.
good.
And that's
Good
what's
enough for
most
now.
important.
Right.
Yeah. And so, but then I say, but what's really going on was I had a bruised, battered, and broken heart bleeding out underneath this perfectionism.
The reason it never works is it's all a lie.
It's so painful.
So it can't, you can't feel the completeness that
No.
you need because all of it
Yeah.
is a lie.
Yeah. Like I couldn't wait to have something to post about, to put something pretty up because it would like trump the things that were bubbling up for me for this little window of time that I chased that feeling of this, like what other people think is more important. And a lot of that goes back to my childhood as well. That was really something ingrained in me is what others think about us
It's important.
is important. And
Makes sense.
it is when we're representing Jesus, but it's not. What's really important is the heart
That's right.
of what's really going on, which I felt not good enough. And
Not to be used as a weapon because it is important how we act and how we represent ourselves. But it is about the heart behind the person.
yeah. Yeah, and we've already talked a little bit about the unhealthy coping behaviors I had of shopping and drinking and avoiding.
I want to go into the alcohol.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you started buying me alcohol.
Yes.
Yet knowing you didn't want me to be drinking, yet you did want me to because of you liked that version of me better sometimes.
Yes, most of the time. And I didn't really know you without it. But the times you were irritable, you weren't drinking. So I started to put two and two together and I started to figure out ways like I would stop by the liquor store 2 or 3 times a week to pick up bottles of liquor for you. And I would bring it home and give it as a gift and a surprise. And look what I got you. And because for a little bit, it would make me feel good that I was making you happy, but I was enabling and being codependent, not allowing you to be an adult and be personally responsible because I was enabling something that was really unhealthy.
That's right.
But I didn't know any other way. I thought about that so much and I just had no idea how to work through that. I think the last thing I want to touch on is I wanted you to confide in me and you weren't. And I did not understand the depth of your trauma that you had gone through. And so I think what was lacking there, I've thought about this, is the lack of safety in our conversation, emotional safety, that you would even feel like you could share with me. Because I was so full of judgment, I didn't understand the depth of it, so the judgment was high. I thought you were being a victim all the time. Yeah. I thought you were exaggerating and making, like, what is it? Something out of a molehill? What is that quote?
A mountain out of a molehill.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's it. But I like
That's what it felt like.
or a molehole.
Mole.
Moles dig holes. You may be making a mountain out of a molehill.
That's right. But yeah, it really takes empathy, active listening, and being present with each other to create that safety in the relationship, to even be able to open up about the hard things that are going on.
Yeah.
And none of that was present.
What you're talking about is if there is this desire in me to share with you my emotions, my feelings, obviously on the other side of me, I want to share it with somebody who's not judgmental, who would be curious, who would allow me to share and who would create an emotionally safe place for me and not shut me down or be defensive or make me feel negative about what I'm bringing up to you. Yeah, absolutely valuable that we create these safe spaces for each other to share.
Yeah.
And not take it on what you're saying means something about me, because anything someone's saying, it means it about them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I look back at that and I'm like, we had a severe deficit of emotional safety between us. There was none.
Yeah, I didn't give you any emotional safety either.
Yeah. So, at the beginning of this episode, we talked about maybe you've experienced a secondary trauma. That's what this is all really stemming from, is the trauma that you experienced, I experienced in my way, is a secondary trauma, which has created a whole plethora of issues now in my life that I didn't have prior to this incident, that I did not know how to process through. And maybe you've experienced that. Maybe you've experienced it with another family member or a spouse, and you have secondary trauma and secondary PTSD that you're dealing with from that. We just want to encourage you to have really good self-care and seek professional help. It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. And it was my perfectionism that kept me feelings broken on the inside, that kept me from reaching out for help. And don't let that be you. Seek that help that you need so that you can get the healing and move forward and help the other people that are around you in your life. So thanks for joining us today. We want to invite you to subscribe to our journey and our story as we continue to share more of our book. Do you want to tell them what's coming up next week?
I do. I would also like, if this applies to somebody you know, please send it to them.
Yeah.
Please send it to them, and I think it can give them some value.
Like and share, please. So next week, we're talking about, do you know?
Yes. Next week, we're talking about awareness of addiction.
Yes. Do you know someone that has struggled with addiction? You are going to want to tune in to next week's episode. It's powerful, and I think you'll find answers and healing through it. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye. Our next portion doesn't make sense, so I'm trying to figure out where to go with this.
Oh, it doesn't make sense, does it?
Yeah. Oh, I remember. Okay. You put that in the end.